You know, the first thing you realize whenever you stand up here and you put on this headset is that Robbie has a huge melon. I mean, I feel like a little kid who just tried to put on Shaquille O'Neal's hat. It's ridiculous. This thing's bouncing around. So I'm sorry about that. It might move around a little bit. So I think all of you have by now met most of my family. You've met my wife, Tracy, my sons, Brett and Blake. I think you've even met my mother-in-law once. She came. But I don't think you've met all of our family. This is Trixie. Trixie is a miniature schnauzer. Schnauzer, of course, is from the German. It means does nothing all day but bark and sleep. Trixie's been with us for a long time. She's 13 years old now. That's 91, I think, in human years. And she really has become a part of the family. I swear Tracy thinks of her as the daughter she never had. She really does. How many of you have pets who are really a part of your family? I mean, you love them, you treat them like they are. It's amazing to me how people get attached to their animals. I once heard a story of a man who was so attached to his dog that he could not stand to go out of town. He would pass up on work trips because he had to leave his dog with somebody, and he didn't want to do that. Well, finally the time came where he had no choice. He had to go out of town for work, and so grudgingly, he called his brother and asked his brother if he would keep his dog. His brother said, "Sure, don't worry about it, go out of town, I'll keep your dog." Well, the next day, the man calls his brother, and he says, "Hey, how's my dog?" And the man says, "Man, I don't know how to tell you this. Your dog died last night." Well, the man was devastated. But in the midst of his devastation, he was also angry. He was angry with his brother. He said, "I cannot believe that you told me like that. I mean, that was total blunt force trauma. You could have eased me into that a little bit, made it to where I could have handled it a little better." His brother said, I'm sorry. How would you have preferred for me to have told you this?" The man says, "I don't know. Maybe I could have called and I'd said, 'Hey, how's my dog?' And you could have said something like, 'Don't be alarmed, but the dog is on the roof. But don't worry, we've called in the fire department and EMS. We're going to get the dog down. He'll be fine.' And then maybe the next day I could have called you and said, 'Hey, how's my dog?' And you could have said something, 'I don't want you to be too concerned, but when we were getting the dog off the roof, he broke his leg. But don't worry, he's with the best vet in town. He's going to set the leg. He assures us everything's going to be just fine. Your dog will be running around before you get back.' And then maybe the next day, I could have called and you could have said something like, 'Don't be too worried. Complications set in during the surgery. But we called in all the best specialists from the universities, from all over the county. Your dog is going to be fine. They're going to operate. They said everything's going to be fine.' And then on the fourth day, I could have called and you could have said, 'I'm sorry, we did everything we could. Your dog passed gently in the night.' The man says, I think I could have handled that a little better." And his brother says, "Okay, lesson learned. I know how to tell you things from now on." The guy says, "Great. So how's Mom?" The man says, "Well, I don't want you to be alarmed, but Mom, she's on the roof." It seems that no matter whether you're getting your news from the television or from social media, or from the people that you talk to, the world is trying to tell us that we are on the roof. You see images of violence and conflict, loneliness and rage. And the question has to pop into your head. I know it pops into others. How is this possible? In an age of unprecedented prosperity, of incredible technological breakthroughs, in a time when life should be getting easier, why does it seem that so many are struggling so much? Sociologists, psychologists, politicians, university professors, they are all asking this question. And in all of the studies that they publish and all of the interviews that they give, it always seems that at the root of it, they come back to the same answer. Their answer is a loss of hope, despair. The sociologist Dr. Cornel West says that in today's culture, more and more of us are embracing a philosophy of nihilism. Nihilism is a philosophy that says that nothing really matters. Nothing really is something to take too seriously. And when people embrace that philosophy, they lose hope. Now, I think it's important for us to spend just a couple of minutes on that word, hope, and make sure that we're thinking about it correctly. You see, when most of us think about the word hope, we think of it as a wish, something we'd love to see happen, but is not very likely. Kind of like when Robbie was a kid and he would blow out the birthday candles on his cake and he would wish that the Rockets would win a championship with a James Harden-led team. Yes. But the biblical definition of hope is something different. That definition comes from the word elpis. That's a Greek word. That Greek word means a confident expectation. A confident expectation. Something that you can be sure of happening. You can confidently expect that it'll happen. Think of it as the first time that you were jumping into a swimming pool. And maybe your dad or your mom or an aunt or an uncle or an older brother or something were holding out their arms and saying, "Go ahead, jump. I'll catch you. It'll be okay." And you were nervous. You had some butterflies in your stomach, but you were sure that if you actually jumped, everything was going to be fine because your mom or dad or aunt or uncle were going to catch you. That is the sense of hope that everyone's talking about when they talk about a world that is suffering. A sense of hope that says that we no longer have a confident expectation of anything. We no longer have a reason to trust that anything good is going to happen. Now, the pundits will look to the solution to this problem in all sorts of places. Policy prescriptions, economic breakthroughs, job reports. But we know that ultimately the source of hope is in one person. That person is Jesus. It's only through Jesus that we can confidently expect to see justice. It is only through Jesus that we can confidently expect to see an end to conflict and strife. It is only through Jesus that we can confidently expect victory. Jesus is the source of hope. And we have a role to play in helping people to find that source. You see, when Jesus was creating his church, he was not creating a social club. He was not creating a place where you could come, have a coffee and a Danish, hang out with some of your friends, listen to some uplifting music, listen to an uplifting service, and then go about your day. That was not his purpose. He was not creating a social club. All of that was important, but that was not the purpose. What Jesus was creating was a messenger service. He was creating a hotshot service designed to deliver the message of hope that is him to the world. He told us this in the Great Commission. He told us that we are to go forth and preach his good news to all of his creation. He wasn't creating a social club. He was creating a messenger service. And if you look at it, it appears that that message is not being delivered as well as it has been in the past. This week, the Pew Research Center released its survey on religious affiliation. It's been all over the news. People have been reading about it, writing about it. There were a few statistics in there that I found interesting. One is that the ranks of the religiously unaffiliated, those who proclaim themselves to be atheists, agnostics, or I just don't have time to think about it, have grown by about 8 percentage points over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. Now, there are lots of people who say there are lots of reasons for this. Maybe people are being more honest now than they used to be, things like that. But at the end of the day, the thing that strikes me is, what this means is that fully 1 in 4 1 out of every 4 people that you run into on a daily basis is religiously unaffiliated. And even of those that are religiously affiliated, a growing proportion have turned away from Christ. The issue is most profound amongst our youngest. Almost half of the millennial generation, those are people who were born sometime around the early to mid-90s up to our teenagers today. Almost half of millennials say that they are religiously unaffiliated. And the reasons that they give are interesting. They say that we talk to ourselves too much. We're too concerned about the internal politics of the church. They say that we don't have real community impact. And you know what? The numbers kind of back them up. Just look at a couple of these statistics. For every 1 church opening that there is each year, there are 4 church closures. 100 years ago, a town the size of Tomball would have had 27 churches. Today, a town the size of Tomball averages about 11 churches. Just ask yourself, it's simple. How can a church have community impact when there is no church in the community? So why is this happening? Because I can tell you that the message itself is fine. There's no problem with the message of the gospel. It is as good and as relevant and as valid today as it was 2,000 years ago. Which means that the problem must be with the messengers. So let's take a step back for a second. Let's think about what Jesus said we had to have as his church before we could effectively deliver his message. He said this when he was defending the commandments. He was actually asked, "What is the greatest of the commandments?" And this is what Jesus said. You're all familiar with it. He said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind." Therein lies our problem. You see, we have a heart problem. The heart is the seat of the will. It's what motivates us to take action. I once heard a story of a school principal who was very concerned that kids were playing cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians and army at recess. See, the kids were bringing these little plastic guns to school, and after lunch, they'd go out to recess and they start shooting each other. And he's very concerned. This is going to encourage violence. This is a problem. And so, being a very conscientious principal, he did what a conscientious principal would do, and he outlawed the little plastic guns. Nobody's allowed to bring those plastic guns to school anymore. Problem solved. Imagine his surprise the next day when he's sitting in his office and someone rushes in and they say, "You're not going to believe this. The kids, they're playing cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, army. They're shooting each other." He rushes out of his office to see what's happening. He outlawed the guns. He gets out there and he sees that the kids have taken bananas from the cafeteria and they're using those for guns. Hey, not to be deterred, the principal says, "Fine, no more bananas in the cafeteria." That'll solve the problem. The next day, once again, someone else rushes into his office. They're still doing it. They're playing cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, army. They're shooting each other. He runs out there. "I don't know what's happening. We got rid of the guns. We got rid of the bananas." And he sees that the kids are pointing fingers at one another. I'd like to see him outlaw those. Culture beats strategy every day of the week. You see, this principal had some strategies for getting rid of cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, and army. But none of those strategies were ever going to be effective as long as the culture that these kids came from was one that said, after lunch, we play cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. In the church, we do similar things. We have all sorts of strategies for how we're going to get people to listen to the message of the gospel. We're going to create coffee shops and bookstores and slick videos. We're going to produce some signs with cool, fancy logos. We're going to start all sorts of programs. And what I'm here to tell you is all of that is great. It's very, very important. But none of it matters at all unless it is built on a foundation of a culture that is reflective of Christ. So what does a culture that is reflective of Christ look like? It's a culture that's built on love. Now, I have a confession to make. When I was a young man, the version of God that I thought I knew was a strictly Old Testament God. He was judge, jury, and executioner, and he ruled my life by fear. And because I was afraid, it gave me permission to look with contempt and disdain and scorn upon others who were doing things that I thought they weren't significantly afraid enough to do. Imagine my surprise when sometime later I read that I actually did not know God. Because in 1 John we're told that anyone who does not love does not know God. Because God is love. And not just love for the people sitting next to you in these seats. Not just love for the people who come within these walls. Love for everybody. Jesus said we got to love our enemies. Those who are doing the worst of the worst to us, the things that we abhor the most, we're supposed to love them. He said that if all you do is love the people sitting next to you or the people in your family, everybody can do that. That's not Christ-like. And see, sometimes in the church, we are victimized by this. We say we love because we love each other. But unless we have a culture that is built on Christ's love, a culture that says we love everybody, no matter what they've done, no matter who they are, then all of our strategies are for nothing. We have a heart problem. And we have a soul problem. The soul in this case, I want you to not think of the soul as that thing that's kind of floating up above, looking at everything. The soul in this context is the physical life. It's what you do with your body. Okay, your five senses. When I think about this, I'm often reminded of the story of the Good Samaritan. You guys know the story. I'm not going to read it to you, but a man was on his way between Jerusalem and Jericho. Road was dangerous. Went through a bad neighborhood. Bandits were there. Sure enough, as the man's traveling, he gets waylaid by bandits, beaten to within an inch of his life, robbed, left for dead in a ditch. Throughout the day, people pass by. A priest, a Levite, they ignore him. And it's not until a Samaritan, the most despised of races for the Jews, comes by that the man actually gets help. The Samaritan tends to his wounds, takes him to an inn, pays his bills. And I think when we read that story or when we listen to that story, it's very easy for us to go all black and white on it. The Samaritan's the good guy. The priest and the Levites are the bad guys. But I'm not sure that's the right way for us to interpret that. See, I'm not sure that the priest and the Levite actually were bad guys. I think they were busy guys. Think about it. Here's the priest. His job is to tend to all of the sacrifices and to pour out blessings on the people. It's a very important job. It's a big job. He's on his way to work. He's going through a bad neighborhood. Everybody knows it's a bad neighborhood. All he wants to do is get through this bad neighborhood and get to work so he can do his very important job. Does he see the guy out of the corner of his eye? Maybe, maybe not. He ain't got time to stop. He's got to get to work. Later on, here comes the Levite. Levite also has a very important job. He's got to tend to the tabernacle, protect the Holy of Holies, light the candles, sweep the stairs. If he's late, he's going to be in trouble. He's going through a bad neighborhood. He's doing the equivalent of locking his doors and saying, let me just get on through here so I don't have to stop. He's not a bad guy. He's a busy guy. And I think that resonates with us because that's us today. We're not bad people. We're busy people. We got things to do. We don't want to stop in a bad neighborhood. Maybe we didn't even notice that someone was out there. And you know, it's hard where we live and where we worship. You look outside these doors and you see million-dollar homes and you see beautifully manicured lawns, and it's easy to overlook the suffering that is right in our midst. But in the Spring Woodlands area, I pulled these statistics. It took me like 5 minutes on Google, really. In the Spring Woodlands area, there's about 150,000 people. In that number, 25,000, I know it's hard to believe, 25,000 of our neighbors live at or near poverty. 30,000, fully 1 out of every 5, has been diagnosed with depression or anxiety. Here in the lap of luxury, one of the 10 best communities to live in, according to several magazines, 2.5 times the rate of depression here as anywhere else in Texas. There's problems around us that we're not seeing. And you would think that, hey, here in the lap of luxury, these people are getting the services they need. They're getting the help they need. But statistics tell us that most people in our community, most of our neighbors, are not having their needs met. One of my pet peeves is that we focus so much on international missions, and I know they're important. They are. They're extremely important. They're critical to the church's mission. But often we do it at the expense of local missions, at the expense of the guy across the street who just needs somebody to talk to. We have a heart problem, we have a soul problem, and we have a mind problem. The mind, the intellect. See, it may surprise you to know that prior to 1800, most intellectual achievements actually came out of the Christian church. The great scientists, authors, humanitarians, politicians, most of them were Christian. The founding fathers, 51 of the 55 founding fathers, were members of a Christian church. The Christian church was the seat of intellectualism, and it was motivated by a desire to understand and to glorify God's creation. And then somewhere around 1800, a couple of things happened. First, the church was attacked directly on an intellectual level, specifically by a philosophy called scientism, that said that there is nothing that can be known unless you can follow the scientific method. Now, there's lots of problems with saying that, but that was the philosophy, and that is the philosophy that even to this day reigns. And at the same time, there was a great revival, which is fantastic, but what the revival focused on was felt needs. It focused on emotion and feeling, as opposed to rationality and logic. So, in other words, it focused on the heart to the exclusion of the mind. And so when that happened, what we did was we opened up a field where opponents of Christianity could play. It was undefended flank. And what they were able to do was plant a seed that Christianity is not plausible. And if Christianity is not plausible, why would anyone ever listen to our message? And the results for us have been, at best, that we are timid when we go about sharing our faith. And at worst, that we are belligerent when we go about sharing our faith because we fear the questions that will be asked of us that we haven't thought enough about to be able to answer. In an increasingly secularized world, we know that we're going to face questions about God's existence. Why is God a requirement? How does God explain Darwinism? Can the resurrection be real? Can you trust that the Gospels are valid? And we know that we don't necessarily have all the reasons locked in our head. We know what we feel. But what biblical faith is not blind faith. Biblical faith is a faith that is built on reason and rationality and logic. The apostles did not believe because of something they felt. They believed because of something they saw and could prove. When Paul planted churches, he didn't convince people to come to church just on the basis of feelings. He used their philosophies to prove to them that Christianity was the only source of truth. That's how he convinced them. And we are admonished to do the same thing. Peter tells us that we must always be prepared to provide a defense, to give a reason for our faith. But that takes hard work. That's tough. What it means, I think, is an end to what I call service station Christianity. You hear it all the time. People say, hey, I'm going to church this Sunday to get filled up. And that's good. Church can fill you up. But the implication of that, if you follow it through to its end, is that somewhere along the line in the week, I'm empty. And if we were a bunch of empty Christians walking around out there, then how are we supposed to share and defend our faith? So what this really means is that instead of just coming here to have our felt needs met, which are important and we're going to do that, we also have to come here to have the needs of our mind met. We have to actually challenge ourselves to understand the reasons that we believe. What that means is, it's not, what does this biblical passage mean to me? It means, this biblical passage is the ultimate source of truth, objective, knowable. What is God saying here? We have a heart problem, we have a soul problem, and we have a mind problem. I have with me here a hammer. Here's what I'd like for you guys to do. Just throw out the most outlandish, wildest, craziest things that you can think of a hammer being done with. My friend Sean here, who's visiting, he says that this is probably the first time I've ever held this hammer. He's probably right. My wife does all the handiwork around the house. But I am holding it. And since you know I'm not going to use a hammer for what it's supposed to be used for, what are some of the wildest, most outlandish, craziest things you can think of to do with a hammer? Killing bugs, yes. I think this is a very ineffective fly swatter, but who knows, right? What? Break out car windows. Future vandal right here in the church. Somebody get him some help. What else we got? Change a tire. After church, you got to tell me how you would change a tire with this, right? Now, we're in church, so nobody is saying what I know is already on everybody's mind, that this could be used. Oh, Ryan, you might have thought of it. This could be used as a weapon. Yes? We could hurt somebody with this. Good. But we already knew that Ryan thought that way, so that's okay. All right, good. So all of those things are things that we can use a hammer for. Now, what was a hammer created to do? To pound nails into wood. Of all the things we can do with a hammer, and we can do a whole lot of them, the thing that it was created to do, its purpose, its mission, is to drive nails into wood, and nothing has ever done it better. Now, we get vision and mission confused all the time, so let me just take a step back. A vision for a hammer is to build a beautiful home. But a hammer is never going to build a beautiful home all by itself. You got to have an architect, you got to have wood, you got to have nails, you got to have a screwdriver, saw. I don't know, I've never built a house, but I know you need a lot more than a hammer, right? But within the midst of achieving that vision, the hammer's purpose is to drive nails into wood. Our vision as a church is to make disciples of Christ. Now, there's no way that any of us can do that alone. It's too big a job. I can't do it. Robbie can't do it. You can't do it. The greatest preachers you've ever seen cannot do it alone. We got to have God. We got to have Jesus. We got to have the Holy Spirit. We got to have the Bible. But within the midst of that vision, we have our purpose, our mission, which is to tell people about the hope that is Jesus. In fact, we understand this so well that it's actually in the mission statement of this church. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. I went out on the website. This is what I found. This is what it says we're here for. We're here to bring hope to this community. Hope is not found in a church. Hope is not found in religion. Hope is not found in a religious experience. Hope is a person. His name is Jesus. That's why we're here every Sunday, to do that. I read something on Facebook this week. It said that the world is not going to get this message until people stop going to church and start being the church with the purpose that God created for us. Would you please join me in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this opportunity to hear your word and to once again be challenged by what it is that you have in store for us. Lord, we know that you've done many, many things for us, and all of us here have been beneficiaries of the grace that you've given us. But we also know that you've given us a task that we're supposed to tell others about the hope that is your Son, Jesus. And Lord, we pray that you would motivate us to do so, and that you would give us the tools to see your will done here on earth. We pray these things in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.